There are moments in history when everything changes because someone made a mistake. Not a catastrophic error. Not a deliberate choice. Just a simple human failure that would ripple through centuries and touch billions of lives. This is the story of one such moment. A moment when exhaustion, desperation, and a poorly executed recipe created something that would become synonymous with an entire culture. Something that would define mornings in Paris, inspire artists, feed revolutions, and represent the very essence of refined European civilization. And it all began with a baker who simply could not get it right. Paris in the 1700s was a city of extremes. The wealthy lived in opulent splendor, while the poor fought for scraps of bread in streets that reeked of waste and despair. Bakeries were not romantic places. They were hot, brutal workshops where men worked through the night, their hands scarred by burns, their lungs filled with flour dust, their bodies breaking under endless labor. The bread they made was life itself. When bread was plentiful, the city breathed. When it was scarce, riots erupted and blood ran through the cobblestones. Every loaf mattered. Every batch could mean the difference between survival and starvation. In this world, bakers were not artists. They were soldiers on the front lines of a daily battle against hunger. Among these exhausted warriors was a young apprentice whose name history forgot, but whose mistake it would never forget. He worked in a modest bakery near the Marais district, learning the craft under a master who demanded perfection. The work was relentless. Before dawn broke, he would already be kneading dough, his arms aching, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. Day after day, night after night, he repeated the same motions, creating the same bread that had been made for generations. But he was tired, so desperately tired. The kind of tired that makes your hands shake and your mind drift and your judgment fail. One night, deep in the dark hours, when the city slept and only bakers worked, he was preparing a batch of puff pastry. This was delicate work, requiring precision and patience. The dough had to be rolled, folded, layered with butter, chilled, and repeated again and again until dozens of paper-thin layers formed. Each fold created more layers. Each layer meant more flakiness in the final product. The process was methodical, almost meditative, but it required focus. And on this particular night, focus was something he did not have. His mind wandered. His hands moved automatically. And somewhere in the repetition, somewhere in the exhaustion, he made an error. He rolled the dough too thin. Or perhaps he added too much butter. Or maybe he folded it incorrectly. The exact nature of his mistake has been lost to time, buried beneath centuries of storytelling and myth. But the result was undeniable. When he pulled his pastries from the oven, they were wrong. They were not the neat, uniform, professional pastries his master expected. Instead, they had expanded wildly, creating irregular, almost chaotic shapes. The layers had separated dramatically, creating a texture that was both crispy and tender, with pockets of air throughout. The butter had caramelized in unexpected ways, producing a golden, almost honeyed exterior that gleamed in the candlelight. They looked nothing like what he had intended to make. They looked like failure. He stared at these malformed creations, knowing he should throw them away, knowing his master would be furious if he saw them. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was simply the exhaustion-driven realization that he could not afford to waste ingredients and would have to explain what happened regardless. He broke off a piece. He tasted it. And in that moment, everything changed. The texture was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The exterior shattered at the slightest pressure, releasing a cascade of buttery flakes. The interior was soft, almost creamy, with layers so delicate they seemed to dissolve on his tongue. The flavor was rich, but not heavy, sweet, but not cloying, with a depth that came from the caramelized butter and the perfect balance of salt and wheat. It was not what he had intended to create, but it was extraordinary. It was transcendent. It was accidentally perfect. Word of these strange, crescent-shaped pastries spread slowly at first. A few customers tried them out of curiosity. Then a few more. Then suddenly everyone wanted them. The baker, now running his own shop, could barely keep up with demand. He refined the process, turned the accident into a repeatable technique, but never lost the essential character of that original mistake. He called them croissants after their crescent shape, and they became his signature creation. Other bakers began copying him. Variations appeared across Paris. Some added fillings. Some changed the size. But the fundamental creation remained the same. A pastry born from exhaustion and error that had somehow captured something essential about what food could be. But this was more than just a popular pastry. As the decades passed, the croissant became woven into the fabric of French identity. It appeared in the paintings of the Impressionists, golden and glowing in scenes of Parisian cafes. Writers referenced it as a symbol of civilization and refinement. It became part of the ritual of French mornings, paired with coffee and contemplation, a moment of beauty in the routine of daily life. When France wanted to export its culture to the world, the croissant went with it. French bakeries opened in London, New York, Tokyo, bringing with them the taste of Paris. The croissant became shorthand for sophistication, for European elegance, for the kind of life where even breakfast could be an art form. The numbers tell a story almost impossible to comprehend. Today, the global croissant market generates over $4 billion annually. In France alone, bakeries produce more than 10 billion croissants each year. That is nearly 150 croissants for every person in the country, every single year. The technique that began as one exhausted baker's mistake has been replicated trillions of times by millions of bakers in hundreds of countries, speaking thousands of languages. And each one of those croissants carries within it the DNA of that original accident. The too thin dough, the excessive butter, the incorrect folding, the beautiful failure that became an icon. But the croissant's influence extends far beyond mere consumption numbers. It changed how we think about baking itself. Before the croissant, pastry was about precision and replication. You followed the recipe exactly. You produced consistent results. The croissant taught the world that mistakes could be gifts, that accidents could be revelations, that the most extraordinary creations often come from the moments when everything goes wrong. This philosophy spread throughout culinary culture. Chefs began experimenting more freely. Home bakers became more forgiving of their errors. The entire relationship between creator and creation shifted, becoming more exploratory, more playful, more open to the unexpected. The croissant proved that perfection might be overrated and that beauty could be born from chaos. Consider what else that failed recipe gave us. The croissant created an entire industry of specialized equipment. Machines that could replicate the delicate layering, temperature-controlled proofing chambers, precision butter formulations designed specifically for lamination. Thousands of people now make their living exclusively from technologies that exist only because one baker made a mistake. Consider the training programs, the culinary schools, the master classes devoted entirely to perfecting a technique that began as an imperfection. Consider the competitions where bakers from around the world gather to see who can create the most perfect version of an accident. The croissant has become a standard by which technical skill is measured, a challenge that separates amateur from professional, a test that reveals true mastery. There is something profound in this, something that speaks to the fundamental nature of human progress. We often imagine that great things come from great plans. That transformation requires intention and vision and careful execution. But the croissant tells a different story. It says that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we are too tired to be careful, when our hands slip, when we forget the rules, when exhaustion strips away our perfectionism and forces us to see what is actually in front of us rather than what we intended to create. That exhausted apprentice in that Paris bakery did not set out to change culinary history. He just wanted to get through another night. But in his failure, in his moment of imperfection, he stumbled onto something that would endure for centuries. Think about that the next time you break open a croissant and watch the steam rise from its golden layers. Think about the accident that created it. Think about the baker who almost threw it away, Think about how many times in your own life you have dismissed something because it was not what you planned. How many mistakes have you buried? How many accidents have you hidden? How many moments of unexpected beauty have you overlooked because they did not match your vision of perfection? The croissant is a reminder that we do not always know what we are creating, that our failures might be our greatest gifts, that the things we try to hide might be exactly what the world needs to see. The bakery where it all began is long gone. The street has been renamed. The building has been torn down and rebuilt a dozen times. But walk through the Marais today, and you will smell butter and yeast and caramelizing sugar. You will see golden crescents in every window. You will watch Parisians hurrying to work with paper bags clutched in their hands. And in each of those moments, in each of those bites, that original mistake lives on. Multiplied, celebrated, transformed from failure into tradition. One exhausted baker, one poorly executed recipe, one moment of imperfection that accidentally changed the world. That is the power of mistakes. That is the beauty of failure. That is why the croissant is more than just a pastry. It is proof that our errors might be our greatest creations, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is get it wrong. If stories like this fascinate you, if you want to know more about the tiny moments that created our world, then make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because history is full of accidents that changed everything. And we're just getting started.